All right. Well, I think we're live. I'm Caleb Harrelson. Welcome to the Engaged Truth Show. I'm super excited about the episode today as we are in part 4 of our Answering the Biology on Evolution. And we're joined again by my good friend, Dr. Charles Jackson. How are you doing today, Dr. Jackson?
Well, we're pretty good. Here I am in my COVID classroom, and we're all getting ready for the school year. My wife's a teacher too. We're going to have to wear the masks while we teach in Augusta County and Stanton City. But yeah, we're all coping.
Yeah, I think you're starting next week. Is that right?
Our teachers are coming back next week. First, we do the new teachers, and then the old teachers, and then the next week we actually, our particular school is a private school. We don't start till Thursday the 20th, but we're still a long ways from being ready to go in many, many ways. But that's a teacher's life. So hope your life in El Paso's going well.
Yeah, it is. It's still very, very hot, but we're staying busy with our kids and enjoying our series together. And this week will be our final part of our series. We'll also be picking up Friday as well. So we're going to get in here real soon. We're going to be looking at the textbook's claim on human evolution. And this is a big topic. A lot of people have a lot of questions on this. And so I'm real excited to get into this. Why don't we just go ahead and do that? So let's jump in, and then we're going to take Q&A after your presentation on human evolution and looking at the textbooks here. So anyone who's watching live right now, go ahead and type in questions. You could do it now or at the end, and we'll Lord willing, we hope to get to your questions. So let's go ahead and jump into that, Dr. Jackson.
Well, like I said to you before we got started here, I got about 3 times more slides on this matter.
Yeah.
And the Acts and Facts issue behind your face on your screen, it's got a skull there. It looks like a hominid skull, so it's appropriate. See, when I started the Creation Science Education Ministry, I really thought that the human evolution part of it was negligible and not that important. Even evolutionists believe that if all of the Earth's history and the universe history, I think it's just the Earth's history, was a 24-hour day, that people would be the last half a minute in the history of everything. So even though they're interested in all of the monkey to man stuff, I just didn't think it was important as all the other missing links. But in speaking early in the ministry, I found people really wanted to know. So I just started wool gathering of all of the data and stuff in time to keep up for decades now with the newer finds. And some of the stuff I'll show you is from the 2010s. Well, we'll go on then. Yes, so let's see, share screen, and there it is. Okay, you should see new research shows there never were any ape-men. Got it? Do you have that?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, alrighty. Okay, so let's dig in, and there's, even for human evolution, even in evolutionary terms, they're only talking the past 6 or 7 million years, in the 4.6 billion years of the Earth's history that they believe in. Okay, let's get on here. I like to show a little quote by Richard Dawkins. I'm just going to keep saying the word science until you believe in monkey people. Yeah, okay. And notice these kind of things they do. The chimp's brain is 1/3 the size of ours, but look what they did. They made this chimp's head about 3 times bigger than the guy's head. They'll do all these kind of camera angles and things to make it look good, for their theory. Whereas the bones are actually different in people than they are in monkeys, very much, and we'll get into that a little bit. This a little thing from Dan Letha, who was with AIG for a while. You look depressed. What happened in your last class? Today, I learned that we are nothing special, just animals, little more than highly evolved apes, the result of a giant cosmic accident. What are you learning in your next class? Self-esteem. Talks about the worldview effects of evolution on kids, and that's a big thing. I also like this meme. It's funny. And this shows the whole thing. You know, if a kennel, dog kennel, had been destroyed in a mudslide and all the dogs died and got petrified into fossils, and you know we had Chihuahuas and Beagles and Dobermans and Great Danes and things, you could line them up. You could dig them up and then organize them and say that Chihuahuas were the first ones and that the Great Danes were the final culmination. This is what they've done. They've dug up these fossils from all over the place and tried to put them into a sequence. Now you could take all the living things in the world today and sequence them from amoebas all the way up to, you know, blue whales and make it look like it told a story, but that's very artificial, just like the spoon through the spork to the fork theory here. Now, look at these quotes in the 2010s. The last common ancestor of chimpanzees and humans remains a holy grail in science. That's Discovery Communications. Well, Caleb, what's a holy grail? What does that mean?
It's like something sacred.
Yeah, that would be like the find of the century, like, you know, the Ark of the Covenant and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Look at this guy, too. In New Scientist magazine, we thought we'd just about nailed the human evolution down. Now everything's up for grabs again. That was 2011. And look at, again, the National Academy of Sciences. Bernard Wood, a very famous guy from Harvard, said this: the origin of our own genus, you know, we're Homo sapiens, so we're genus Homo, remains frustratingly unclear. And 2012, in Scientific American, but with so little evidence to go on, the origin of our genus has remained as mysterious as ever. They haven't cleared this thing up. The fossils have only made things worse, like with the horse one, like we talked about before. And there's our little family tree thing here. I've always thought that the evolved woman there looked a lot like Hillary Clinton back in the day, but it's a nice looking woman. I'm not making fun of her, calling her a monkey. Evolution calls us all monkeys, though. But there's our family tree according to the story. I do find this. It's an osteology joke if you don't get it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The humerus is your upper arm bone, that bone. It's the funny bone. Okay. And here's something that happened in 2009, which was the 150th, 150th anniversary of Darwin's book. They named this fossil Darwinius massillae because it was supposed to be the missing link. And they even had a little documentary on it called The Link. And they had articles on it called The Link. And then they tried to retract it and say, no, we're not saying that's the missing link. But it was popularized because it was the year of Darwin and it was very important to them. But let's take a closer look at this. Look at this thing here. Notice the shadow underneath the fossil's little lemur paw.
Huh. That was Ida, right? Didn't they call that one Ida?
Yeah, Ida. Yeah. It was actually
okay.
after the guy's 6-year-old daughter, I believe.
Oh.
Notice the propaganda. There's subliminal training. There's the name Ida. Yeah. Or Ida. Ian Juby, maybe you know Ian. He said this: for the same reason Evos hire artists to create reconstruction of the missing intermediate fossils to convince the public of the supposed overwhelming evidence of evolution. They did this. And I did get the slide from Ian, but through John Hefner in Texas. Look at that. And John's wife marveling asked, is this science or is it science fiction? They're really going for it. So Time magazine here, they're always having it on the cover of some big magazine, some big periodical. Every once in a while they have some big feature article and a feature issue all about evolution being true. They've got to keep that to keep the urban myth going. Nebraska Man, many people have heard of that one. Of course, it was really a pig's tooth. and it was used in the 1925 Scopes trial. Nebraska man was found in Nebraska. It turned out to be a pig's tooth, but it was used in the Scopes trial and flaunted at William Jennings Bryan from his own home state of Nebraska. That here was proof that people evolved from monkeys. One tooth, and they got this in the London Illustrated News in 1924. Charles Darwin himself, in his book, said, the number of intermediate varieties, in other words, missing links, which must have formerly existed on the earth must truly be enormous. Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graded organic chain, and this perhaps is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. He knew the missing link thing was a problem, but had faith that they would find them. But as you know from the horse thing, David Rout from the Chicago Field Museum said, new fossils only made the problem worse. It made it clearer and clearer they were never going to find the links. Here's that Inquiry into Life by Sylvia Mader book. Let's see what they say. There's a picture in here of the family tree of these primates. And notice there are the orangutans, the gorillas, the chimpanzees, and then people. And notice there are points in the family tree story where we split off from the monkeys, and then the next group became the gorillas, and the next group became the chimpanzees, and the next group became the people. Now, we have orangutans, gorillas, and chimpanzees and people today. That's at the very, very top of this blue family tree. The edge, the tips of the branches exist today. The only thing that's make-believe is under, in the past, sort of under the water level where we can't see. And it's interesting. We have a bunch of ancient monkey fossils and ancient people fossils, like Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals and Heidelbergs and stuff like that. But the only thing we don't have, surprise, surprise, the fossils are missing at exactly those little red circled areas there. Just where evolution does its magic and magically makes a group split off into two new groups, that's the only place where we don't have that's why they're always looking for the missing links, because it's right there. We have documentation of the changes from ancient chimpanzees to modern chimpanzees, ancient humans to modern humans, but we don't have anything that documents the circled part of the story. The part evolution says is all what evolution is about. There's nothing for that, no proof for that. Donald Johanson, who discovered the Lucy fossil in 1974, said this in 1995, nobody really places a great deal of faith in any human tree, and phylogenetic meaning family tree, like the one that we just saw. There's a Neanderthal fossil skull. And let's look at now notice on the cover of Time here, 1999, you'll a lot of times see a skull like this, where part of the skull is really natural color and the rest is sort of a gray. Well, that's because the bone part, the yellow part, was the only part they found. So they went and used their evolution-guided imagination to make the rest of the skull, and lo and behold, it looks pretty good, doesn't it, for the evolutionists. Now notice down at the bottom here on the right-hand corner, Stephen Jay Gould on the creationism wave. They gotta slam us every once in a while in these articles, but look at what they do. Now here's an example of a skull like this, and you see these a lot. Like I said, don't forget, the white part here, the plaster part, is imagination guided by evolution. And then when they make these like wax figures from the skulls, it has hair and eyeballs and the ears and the nostrils and the lips and the eyelids and everything else and eyebrows. Now they can tell anything that the bone would tell you, but they cannot tell body hair or so much of the stuff. And the reason I had the eyes circled there for a moment was because, there we go, because they draw the whites of the eyes, and very rarely do monkeys or other animals, they have different eyelids than us. They have a sclera, but it normally doesn't show. I mean, if you like start sticking a horse in their rump. They'll turn their head around and turn their eye far enough that you can see the white of their eyes. But for humans, don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes. I mean, humans normally do show the whites of our eyes, but animals and monkeys ordinarily don't. And so, but they always make these reconstructions showing the whites of their eyes. So according to evolution's story, at what point did animal rights and human rights become two separate things? Yeah, when did we stop being monkeys, animals, and start being humans? Well, we know from the biblical creation account, but it's really fuzzy with the evolution story. Now in the foreground, you see a Neanderthal skull. And this is the depiction that you normally get of what Neanderthals were like. Monkey-like, grunting, knuckle-dragging, beetle-browed. But now the newer version of Neanderthals, and this is a wax figure in a museum in Europe, is more like this. They've realized Neanderthals weren't as primitive or beast-like. They were people. Neanderthals were people too. Something creationists have been saying for 50 years, but now they've begun to realize it themselves. Notice that Neanderthal fossils are found not just in where they originally were discovered in the Neander Valley in Germany. Tal means valley in German, and Neandertal means Neander Valley. So it's named after the place they originally found the fossils. But their Neanderthal fossils have been found in Spain. There's a lot of Gibraltar fossils in Italy and even in Israel, in the Middle East. So they're very common all around. The only reason you find them a lot in Northern Europe is because Neanderthals were built more stocky, broad nasal passages for the warming of cold Ice Age air. As people go, their builds were perfect for the Ice Age. Nobody else wanted to live in Northern Europe. Only Neanderthals could handle that kind of climate. When the Ice Age ended, the others moved into the neighborhood, Cro-Magnons and the rest, and they intermarried before the Neanderthal tribe became outcompeted. And there is still Neanderthal DNA in Northern Europeans today. Now, this is the modern version of Neanderthals. Campfire, hunting parties. There's a teenage Neanderthal couple in the background. Look, Susie, do you see the Big Dipper? As a family, they're getting their dinner ready. And they're seen as much more civilized now than the pictures in the past. National Academy of Sciences. Neanderthals are often portrayed as primitive, but the differences between Neanderthals and humans might be much less than previously thought. Western European Neanderthals are, in fact, today's Western Europeans. 4% of today's Europeans actually have Neanderthal DNA in them. I could discuss that for a great deal, but we now realize they were people. They're just an extinct tribe, like the Mohicans and many of the Great Plains Indians of North America, and the Tasmanian Aborigines. They're also an extinct tribe. But Neanderthal DNA exists today. Neanderthals, we have found flax, turquoise and pink flax fibers in their caves, paintings in their caves. They had art. They used makeup, nice clothes. We found a bear bone that had holes drilled in it like a musical instrument. They buried flowers with their dead. They buried their dead. Thoughts of the afterlife. They had religion and culture and a little society. And they were very modern humans. Their brains were even bigger than ours by 200 centimeters, cubic centimeters on the average. And look at, many evolutionists have reclassified Homo neanderthalensis as Homo sapiens, variety Neanderthalensis. And we're Homo sapiens, variety sapiens, or modern people, realizing that Neanderthals are really just people. You'll see a lot of these charts, not only Neanderthals, but in the middle there, Australopithecus afarensis is Lucy, Homo habilis or handyman, the Boisier and Aethiopicus. You never see them in the family listings anymore. This is an old one. It turns out that habilis and erectus lived at the same time. They dated the fossils by their methods and by the layers and found out they actually lived at the same time. That messes with their stair-step story. Heidelbergensis was really a person. They were Homo sapiens. Cro-Magnons were really Homo sapiens. Neanderthalensis was really Homo sapiens. They were just people, not monkeys. And then all of these other fossils, look at the fragmentary evidence. This was like 1999 at the time of this article. And really, they had fragmentary evidence, but the more fossil bones we find, the more and more of these things, including Lucy, appear very, very monkey-like. So instead of a smooth gradation from monkeys to people, in the fossil record, what we really have are monkeys and people, no monkey people. And we are able to categorize them as such and separate this big, big gap, this missing link gap in the middle. It's got problems. If Homo ergaster and Homo erectus are seen now to be the same thing. I'll show you evidence of that later. Ardipithecus ramidus, Sahelanthropus chilensis, and Auroran tugenensis are also now classified as all in the same genus. And so that means they're all the same thing. They couldn't be separate stair steps, much like all of these things they're calling monkey people, which are really Homo sapiens. This is another familiar type of chart, like in the Campbell book. We'll go into more detail on some of these. People could freeze frame this in the recording if they want to study it a little more. Milford Walthop of University of Michigan, he is an evolutionist, but look what he said in PhysOrg. And he's talking about the Sahelanthropus chadensis that I just looked at, which was 2002. And then in 2006, his team finished observing it, and they said, we wanted to make sure we were absolutely accurate, but Sahelanthropus chadensis is not a hominid at all. Some people are going to like it and some people are going to hate it, but it will stimulate more discussion. So in 2002, National Geographic touted it as the missing link, 7 million-year-old fossil, the missing link between monkeys and people. And Walthop and his team said, we've analyzed this for 4 years. It's not a hominid. It's not in our ancestry. And UCal Berkeley said 2 years after they found chadensis, one group of fossils found in Chad, while others found in a Kenyan site have been dubbed Auroran tugenensis. All of these are sufficiently similar, they should be included in the same genus as Ardipithecus, as Ardi. Well, Ardipithecus cadava, not Ardipithecus ramidus. But if they're all in the same genus, they're pretty much the same thing. And their similarities are so great. They shouldn't be called Sahelanthropus and Ardipithecus. They should pick an Auroran. They should pick one instead of all these 3 different genus names. They're very, very similar. They're just, I call it the dead monkey society. They're just all dead monkeys. And here's the famous Lucy. Yeah, when I've shown this to like junior high groups, they got all, you know, jazzed about so I put a little bathing suit things on them there. But you see in the middle here, the picture, let's see, the Lucy fossil was so famous because they found 40% of the bones. Now that's way more than they ever found of any other, you know, missing link, proposed missing link fossil. And so they were super excited. Notice that the right hip is missing. And there's not very much in the way of fingers, and there's no toes. Not yet. They found some later. So there were some weirdo little things going on. Okay, let's see.
Now on Lucy, weren't there some claims related to the hip that somehow that is connected with it being a link?
Oh yeah, we're gonna go into that.
Okay, I'm getting ahead of you.
We'll get there, but I don't have time to show the video of Dr. Owen Lovejoy. Sawing up the Lucy hip they did find and rebuilding it into what he wanted it to look like. This is an artist's reconception of Lucy. Again, look at the whites of the eyes, the human-like expression on the face, the ears, the lips, the the hairline, everything, it looks, it is, look at what the sculptor said. I wanted to get a human soul in this ape-like face to indicate something about where she was headed. So they just doctored it up. National Geographic didn't mind that they used their artist imagination to make it look. Don't forget, look at the skull. That's all they had, and they drew this. Okay.
Wow. Yeah,
and
that's a big jump.
Yeah, it really makes it look so good for the evolution story. This is from Dr. David Menton and his Lucy She's No Lady presentation. This is a model at the St. Louis Zoo, and he likes to say, look at the look on her face. It's like, what dress should I wear to the party tonight? You know, notice the hand, the knuckles. Now, your hand bones are different from a chimpanzee's. I mean, you can bend your fingers like Lucy's doing there, but that's a human hand. Between your knuckles, your finger bones are straight as an arrow. But between the knuckle joints and a monkey hand, the bones are arched like a bow, so they can get a perfectly round grip on a perfectly round branch. And what they did find in Lucy's toes, they found 2 toe bones. That her toe bones and finger bones are more curved than a chimpanzee's bones are curved, and that's very important. Also, Lucy's brain was 1/3 the size of yours, just like a chimpanzee, even at full growth. If she tried to stand up like in that bathing suit picture, she'd only be 3.5 feet tall and weigh 65 pounds, just like a chimpanzee. I'm sorry, this is a dead monkey. It's not a person. There's the feet. They used their artist imagination to make the feet. Dr. Menton complained to the museum, and they said, well, we know that that's not the way the bones are, but we were trying to get across the point. So they didn't even care.
Yeah, where does science leave and philosophy begin? You have to ask yourself.
Very, very much so. In his book, Lucy, The Beginnings of Humankind, Donald Johansson's quoted saying, I was trying to jam evidence of data into a pattern that would support conclusions about fossils, which on closer inspection, the fossils themselves would not sustain. That's 1981. He found the fossil in 1974. He said, it's hard for me now to admit how tangled in that thicket I was, but the thing about bias is that it does make one deaf to the cries of other evidence. I like honest scientists.
Yeah.
A development that happened later, much later, you can see the year is 2015, was Littlefoot, or they called it the baby Lucy. Now, the baby Lucy comes in the fossil layers by their own dating methods 100,000 years before Lucy. But give or take 100,000, whatever. I mean, Lucy was supposed to be 3.2 million years old, but this one gave us a little more interesting evidence about it. The Dakika baby, which was actually a baby version. Look at the teeny weeny little skull there of the Lucy fossil. And there it is compared to Australopithecus robustus, Australopithecus gracile, which later became Australopithecus afarensis. There's a Lucy female. Now, notice the little baby foot there. The foot, they didn't find all the bones. Let's see what the National Geographic said about that. The Dakika baby's big toe is still locked in sandstone, but they drew it like a human big toe, not like a monkey big toe, which is essentially a thumb on the foot. Monkeys have 4 hands. They really have a hand at the end of their leg bones. But when they did dig it up, turned out that it was actually what they ended up admitting was a divergent big toe. In other words, a thumb. There's the little Lucy. Again, notice the other kind of monkey, fingers. Look at how they're curved between the knuckles, whereas a human foot and hand, the bones are straight as an arrow between the knuckles. And the Lucy, we just got some problems with all of that. All right. Next. Notice this monkey here. On the monkey's right there, that is not his hand, that's the foot that's in the lowest part of the picture there. Notice that opposable thumb on the foot. Now, the reason that evolutionists drew and made wax models of Lucy's foot as though it was human was in the same layer, but 1,000 kilometers away in some volcanic ash, they found this footprint that you see on the left, and it was exactly human. So since humans weren't supposed to be bald for another 1,000,000 or 2 years, they couldn't have been a human, so they figured Lucy must have made those footprints. Of course, if you're a creationist, this is not weird. We figure people and monkeys lived at the same time then like they do now, 6,000 years ago when God made them, not 3,000,000 years ago. But because they found these footprints, some evolutionists have even suggested that Lucy, after they after they found the divergent big toe on the baby Lucy, that Lucy and baby Lucy, because there are baby footprints next to this one, or juvenile footprints, that they just pulled their divergent big toe in when they were making these footprints. So let's take a look again at the footprint, and showing the bottom right-hand corner there, very, very much, that's a hand grip on anything. You see this monkey is actually gripping 4 handfuls of stuff here. Again, notice the human foot and the chimpanzee foot, and then notice the actual footprint at Laetoli. These are the Laetoli footprints. They found actually a pretty good many of them at Laetoli, 1,000 kilometers away in that volcanic ash.
Wow. I have on my notes Laetoli human footprints is in 1978, Laetoli, Tanzania, and it's dated at, according to the secular dating, it's at 3.5 million years old, but it's indistinguishable between modern humans. But can you break down some more, like, the problems of that on the timeline of evolution? Because I think this is a really huge issue.
Well, it's still close enough in the ballpark to make them happy, but the fact that it looks just like a modern human, and they found this whole track, it's a lot of them, and it's almost like you can imagine a child and their parent walking, hand in hand along. There's 2 sets of tracks. They even stop and stamp around a little bit, and they're probably looking at the volcano that's erupting. Look, little Susie or Charlie, whatever they, Jacob or whoever they call them. Look at that. And these are exactly human footprints, okay? And the evolutionists don't dispute that. They're just saying, well, that's because Lucy had human feet, you see. They're not really thinking of any other explanation but evolution. 1975, and they kept finding more tracks. Look at what Mary Leakey says in National Geographic in 1979. Remarkably similar to those of modern man. Look, she said, they look so human. Exactly the same as our feet. That's because this was a person, not a monkey or a monkey person in 1979. They just aren't getting it. They're not letting the left hemisphere of their brain know what the right hemisphere is thinking.
Yeah, doesn't it kind of go back to I've heard Charlie say, if you're driven by your philosophy, he would say everything's evidence for evolution. If that's your presupposition that it's already true, evolution is.
Yeah. Well, look at these 2 guys, one from the American Museum and one from West Michigan University at the American Association of Physical Anthropologists, and Scientific American quoted them in 2005. Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy, almost certainly did not walk like us, or by extension, like the hominids that were at Laetoli, and they cited the problems that they weren't the same creature. Those bones and those footprints did not go together. In 1998, let's move on now. The Australopithecus africanus was popularized. And again, they had to redraw the family tree. In the lower left-hand corner, it says an ape-like body, more ape-like than Lucy, yet it comes 1,000,000 years higher in the fossil strata. So that's weird. How are they going to explain this? Let's see. Look what it says here. Because the fossil record for early hominids is so fragmentary, and they normally don't admit that they used to be able to fit all the bones they had for all the missing links in one coffin. There's so few. Inferences and predictions fill in the gaps that the fossils left open. In the absence of fossil specimens complete enough to gauge Africanus's body dimensions, the guy that came after Lucy, it had been assumed that the species had at least as human-like a build as the earlier Lucy. Well-preserved skulls show that Africanus had a slightly larger brain than Afarensis. Well, you get a group of people and you're going to find some people with slightly larger and smaller brains. That doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah.
As well as skull features. But now I love when they learn more data and study something harder, but a closer look at the available fossils of Lucy and the Africanus reveals that Africanus may have had longer arms and shorter legs, limbs that were more chimp-like than Afarensis, more chimp-like than Lucy, even though this guy comes 1 million years later. You can see the scale on the bottom, 4 million years ago, 3 million years ago, 2 million years. Look at this. If so, the implications are striking. Not if you're a creationist. This makes sense if you're a creationist. These things lived at the same time and they were both dead monkeys. One possibility is hominids underwent an evolutionary reversal between Afarensis and Africanus, perhaps to adapt to a more arboreal or tree-living lifestyle. Look, when they dug up to Africanus, they found exactly the opposite of what their theory predicts you should find. No problem. Evolution just went backwards for 1 million years, silly creationists. Look, we tried to pull something like that. That'd be on us like chicken on a June bug. It would not work. But they're allowed to cheat like that. Look at this.
Yeah.
Now, this guy, Lee Berger, continued on in this article, but he becomes important later with 2 other missing link fossils that most of his evolutionist friends won't accept. But Berger thinks it's more likely that the 2 species evolved separately, that Australopithecus Lucy and Australopithecus afarensis Lucy and Australopithecus africanus were just 2 separate things. They were sister species. They had a missing link. The missing link is still missing. These 2 are not, missing links of each other in any way, shape, or form. Only one of them then must have been our real ancestor, is what Lee Berger says. And you can see the artist's conception on the left of an adult male Lucy, and on the right of an adult male Africanus. Look at the thing. It's got longer arms and shorter legs. Now they show them walking upright, but they probably didn't. They probably knuckle dragged, just like chimpanzees and gorillas do today when you look at their skeleture. Well, what about this reversing evolution? This is the guy here, very well known from UCal Berkeley, Tim White, who talks about evolutionary reversals, talking about, he's the one that along with Owen Lovejoy, really popularized the Ardipithecus ramidus fossil. And look at what he says. If Artie were really ancestral to the chimps, certain features would have had to later evolve back to their more ape-like conditions. An evolutionary reversal that's highly unlikely. He says evolutionary reversals are very unlikely. That's in Science, referring to Science News. 2006, Time magazine, going on and on about how, we're very different from, similar to monkeys in our DNA, but, we have 3 billion base pairs, and they are only 1.23% different, even in the best estimation that they've been able to make. We're still that much different, but that's still for 36 million base pairs different from the monkeys. Well, that causes J.S. Haldane's dilemma from the 1930s. How often do mutations happen? How often do good ones happen by luck? How long would it take to make that many things which would be 1,667 gene mutations in the favorable direction. And Haldane's dilemma was, when you calculate it, it would take way more than 7 million years. So it's a dilemma. They still haven't been able to figure out how evolution could have done it. And that's 36 million base pairs. Now, some of the weird and wacky things that they found out, of the several branches of the family tree, if they find that something has DNA that shows less differences between us and them, then they have to figure it comes later in the story. And more differences between us and chimpanzees. Well, when they got the Tumai skull, this really messed it up for them, because it turned out that, look at the bottom circle there, some members of the two groups seem to have interbred about 1.2 million years after they first diverged. So this is weird. In the first place, in the caption, they said that the Tumai was probably a non-hybrid that's not our ancestor. Now, the books all have it as one of our ancestors. And but the group split apart, but they must have come back together again, because they remixed their DNA that was becoming more like human. This was demanded by their wedded love to the genetic clock thing, the molecular clock thing. Look at what it says here in the upper right there. But down at the bottom, Daniel Lieberman at Harvard, a very well-known evolutionist, says, it's a cool analysis. My problem is imagining what it'd be like to have a bipedal human and a chimpanzee viewing each other as appropriate mates, not to put it too crudely. Yeah, I mean, a four-legged thing mating with a two-legged thing, this is what would happen. But they weren't willing to give up what the DNA thing, their sweetie told them. So they have to say stuff like this sometimes. 2007, Newsweek magazine made several interesting statements. There's Haldane's dilemma. Fossils never resolved when our lineage is split from the monkeys. That they admit here in 2007 that fossils never did prove it. But DNA might. DNA changes at a fairly regular rate. Now there's the little, where's Waldo? There's the fly in the ointment.
Yeah.
They just say DNA changes regularly. Therefore, now that lets us use this rate to calibrate a molecular clock. But that's not really true. Look at what Milford Wolpoff says. DNA, like mitochondrial DNA, we assume it changes only at random, but evidence indicates natural selection molds it, so it's not random, making mitochondrial DNA and other such analyses useless. Useless. These things are not gradual, they're not continuous. Now, using mitochondrial DNA, though, they found out that it actually can mutate 20 times faster than they thought. So they originally thought, when they analyzed everybody's mitochondrial DNA in the world, and they backtracked it by mitochondrial DNA differences, how long would it take to get everyone's mitochondrial DNA this different? Well, 120,000 years. Wow. So they said that because it only goes through the maternal line. I mean, you've got mitochondrial DNA, but you get it from your mother. Mm-hmm. And so they guesstimated that it would be 120,000 years ago, but then they realized it mutated 20 times faster. And it's interesting, but we don't have time to go into why. You can look at the article from 1998. That 20 times faster means that the mitochondrial Eve was 6,000 years ago, not 120, to do the math. So they're freaking out. Well, no one thinks this, but that's what the data says. Ann Gibbons, a very well-known evolutionist science editor. Well, let's look at something else in National Geographic, showing that that a lot of these things that they had that were all these wonderful flagstone steps and the little flagstone walkway leading from monkeys to people were really, Ergaster and Erectus were really the same thing. Rudolfensis and Habilis, there are all these kinds of things that they found out that weren't stair-step things, like the three genuses that are really one genus that we already looked at. 2007, again, that same. The trouble was Sahelanthropus chadensis, the Tumai fossil, lived 7 million years ago. But their DNA evidence said that it was 6 million years ago that we split from the chimps. So it can't be the hominid. They're using a biblical reference of the of the Chaldees and all that, where Abraham was the break-off of the Jews from the rest of the human tribes. So they're saying the hominid, the first creature, to break off from the chimps. Chadensis Tumai can't be. So that's in 2007, they realized that. But also DNA makes it clear that Homo erectus was a dead end and not our ancestor either. Dead end, never led to us. Again, they're just dropping flagstone steps out of our family tree. And look at what happened in the year 2007. A researcher in England found that Homo erectus and Homo habilis, upright walking man and handyman, actually were the same species. And the little skull and the big skull are just a sexual dimorphism. They lived at the same time. Actually, on the left, you see Homo erectus skulls. That's right. And there's a big sexual dimorphism. Males and females are hugely different in size, more like in great apes, not humans. And then you got this Homo habilis skull, but they actually were found and dated the same, like I think it was 1.4 million years ago or something. The guy who led the team that discovered this said it was like finding that your grandmother and your great-grandmother were really sisters, and they weren't, one wasn't the ancestor of the other. It really messes up that family tree. Now, Ardipithecus ramidus in 2009, and again, I had junior hires get all woo about the naked monkey. If that really turns you on, though, you really need to go to the guidance counselor, for some help. But I think that the bones look more like ET. But this thing was about 5 feet tall, and look at the feet on this thing. I mean, it really does look. This is not on its way to becoming human. And look at those, the arms are super long. Its brain was 1/5 the size of your brain. And then they were going all about how it's the missing link, Ardipithecus ramidus. Well, let's see here. Let's move on. And there's Tim White, who popularized the skeleton in 2009. Look what he says. Artie was not a chimpanzee. She wasn't human either. He said she did not walk on her knuckles, but on her palms. No ape today walks like that. We can't say this species was a direct ancestor of humans. So we have to be careful. It suggests the direction of early hominids was away from the chimp. It just suggests. He said that in USA Today in October of 2009 when Artie hit the news stands. But look what he said in a phone call with MSNBC News. He said, chimps and humans evolved from some long ago common ancestor, but each evolved and changed separately. He said about Artie, this is not the common ancestor, but it's the closest we've ever been able to come. Now, keep that in mind. As we now, the guy who dug it up says it's not the common ancestor. But look what National Geographic did next year in July. Look what the title says, 4 million-year-old woman. And it's Ardipithecus ramidus. There was even a thing on YouTube where this guy's dancing around singing Ardipithecus ramidus. She's related to all of us. They just, National Geographic picked up the ball and ran with it while Tim White is saying, but it's not the missing link, guys. But now it's in all the books. It's in National Geographic. It gets in all the textbooks. And Ardipithecus ramidus is presto, our ancestor. Even though they got it, this is very, very common, Caleb. What they will do is the person that digs it up will say, it's pretty close, but it's got this problem, this problem, this problem, so it can't be our ancestor. But then the magazines pick it up, sensationalize it, secondary sources, then the textbooks pick it up, and the guy who discovered it keeps saying, I never said it was the missing link. This is why when something first gets discovered, you ought to read what the guy says about it, because the next thing you know, it's going to end up in National Geographic. I just love this quote. In February, National Geographic said this in the letters to the editor, and yet in July that year, they was a very biased presentation of the fossil. Well, let's take a look at this chart from Science magazine, that very issue that had Artie on the front cover with this ET looking thing here. That was on the cover of the 2009 issue of Science magazine. And this is their human evolution chart as of 2009. It hasn't changed a whole lot. And I'll tell you, see that little, you can see the little question mark. It was Lee Berger that proposed the Australopithecus sediba would fill in that question mark, but we'll see later that that didn't work either. And that was after 2009. But let's go on. Okay, Sahelanthropus chilensis. Let's review up to this point. Milford Walpole said in 2006, it was discovered in 2002. It's really an ape of some kind. Let's see. The Associated Press, the Washington Post said, it's from a line of non-hybrids that were not humans. It's not the first creature ancestral to humans, after all. All of this was known within 5 years after the fossil was dug up. But there it is in 2009 in Science magazine. Well, it's monkey bones. The DNA is against it. It's in the wrong layer of the strata. It should be at 6 million years for their story. It's in the wrong place. It's not our ancestor. Now, the Auroran tugenensis, Sahelanthropus and Auroran should be in the same genus, that one article said from UCal Berkeley, that statement. Well, if they're the same thing and Sahelanthropus isn't us, then neither is Auroran us. And then there's Artie. Well, this is not the common ancestor, says the guy who dug it up. So that gets crossed off the list too. This is making mincemeat out of this family tree, which we already heard nobody puts any great, Johansson said nobody puts any great confidence in. There's Lucy. Lucy's a side branch on the family tree, said New York Times in 2008. It almost certainly did not walk like us, or by extension, like the whatever made the tracks at Laetoli. Remember, we read that article. There it is. And Lucy has been dropped, not by most, I exaggerate, dropped by lots of researchers as nothing but a monkey. Johansson said Lucy has really been dethroned. Let's see. Well, let's keep going on this. Oh, yeah. Remember what I said about Africanus a million years later in the family tree? It's more chimp-like than Afarensis. That's okay. Evolution just went backwards for a million years and then threw it back in forward gear after that, silly creationist.
Yeah, driven by philosophy more
like
than anything.
What you and Charlie were saying, yeah, if you already think evolution's got to be true, then you'll just make excuses. This is what I like to call a dog ate my homework excuse, which me as being a teacher, I hear that sometimes. Look, Africanus is backward. It's exactly in the opposite spot of where it should be for their story to be true. It didn't bother them. I'm crossing it off anyway. And Homo habilis, handyman, never gave rise to Homo erectus or upright walking man, said the guy at University College in London. Look at Homo habilis lived at the same time as Homo erectus. They're not, they're Fred Sporia. They're not in a sequence. They're actually contemporaries, so they can't make two parts of the story. And so they're not there either. They're not legit in a part of the story. And Homo erectus was almost certainly a dead end. The DNA proved it couldn't be our ancestor. So if that's not, and it lived the same time as habilis, I guess habilis could still be, but DNA disqualifies that. We'll take that out of the family tree too. Now the rest of them, the hobbit fossil or Homo floresiensis, that's probably some kind of a pygmy, or like the pygmy tribes in Africa, we realize now, not real hobbits. Heidelbergensis is now an archaic Homo sapiens. Neanderthalensis is now Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, and Homo sapiens us. The rest of them are old human skulls, and the ones before that are old monkey skulls, and there aren't any monkey humans. This is just so fun to watch all of this. Again, they don't know what the left hand, they don't let the right hand know what the left hand is doing. They draw all these conclusions. All these researchers don't compare well enough, and then they're just, it's like watching a clown show to me. You know, like when a little Volkswagen drives out in the middle of a three-ring circus and all the clowns start running out and jumping and doing backflips. This is, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be insulting, but this is what Science Magazine comes up with, knowing all this stuff that went on before 2009. They still, I call this intellectual inertia. Intellectual inertia. Resistance in change or motion, in motion or direction. And they just can't give it up. They can't give it up. I told you I was going to tell you about that little place where there was a question mark, and it was Lee Berger, the guy that said that Lucy and the Africanus were really just at the same time. They're two branches off the same tree, and only one could be our ancestor. Berger came up with this. Now look at the size of the skull next to Berger's normal human skull. And then they found these bones in the fingers of whatever it is, Australopithecus sediba. Now look at his skull, look at his skull, and now look what they drew. Now, from what they had, they got this. In 2011, National Geographic draws this picture. You see everything, you know, the musculature, the facial expression, the lips, the hairline, the ears. You know, they make it as look as, from the skull they found, they make it look as mix of human and monkey as possible. But look at how teeny that skull really is. And that's a full-grown skull here. This is a chart in National Geographic of August 2011, and Lee Berger. Notice that none of the branches on this family tree actually is connected to each other. They're in these little straight lines that don't connect to the trunk in any way that isn't imaginary. And you could you know, make your screen big, or it's not too hard to read these things. So I didn't want to take too much time. There's sediba. Let's see if I can draw a circle around where they've got the sediba here. Yeah. There's Australopithecus sediba, making this link between Africanus and, let's see, what's that other one there? Maybe habilis isn't in our direct ancestry according to this. Yeah, but erectus is. And so it made the jump from Africanus to erectus, and then on, of course, to us. But you don't see, notice Heidelberg and Neanderthals, and they're really all just people, those things. And then these things down here are really all just monkeys. And Tomai, remember Tomai? Well, it's not even listed anymore. It's dropped. It's dropped from the list. They don't even mention Sahelanthropus chadensis in this particular chart. What?
I was going to add on that. I have, I think this one, if I remember right, is from Contested Bones. There's a quote. They talk about sediba. It's a really great book for any of our viewers or listeners. That's by Christopher Roop and Dr. John Sanford. And they quoted in their National Geographic in 2015. They said, though dozens of paleoanthropology credit him with jaw-dropping find, most dismissed his interpretation of it. Sediba was too young, too weird, and not in the right place to be ancestral to Homo. It wasn't one of us. and since neither was Berger. This is their words. Since then, prominent researchers have published papers on early Homo that didn't even mention him or his find.
You know, a lot of evolutionists, and I had a lot of quotes on that. I don't have time to go into all of them, but
yeah,
a lot of
so much.
Evolutionists were very skeptical about Berger and his Sediba, as they were Homo naledi, his next one. Mom and Dad, in school we learned about human origins, and it's totally changed the way I see people. What did your child learn in school this year? Now this is interesting. Teilhard Dina Magnoliana. This is 55 million years ago. They said he was the Einstein of the forest. Notice this cute little hands and the eyes and everything. They found just 5 teeth, and they made up this whole thing. This is the kind of stuff that goes on in Missing Link. Oh, I don't think I have time to read that. Okay. So the kind of stuff, the kind of falderall, that scientific falderall that goes on, the wishful thinking, hopeful thinking, sloppy science, and all Evos speak to one another about what each fossil means, remembering that we can't let those weirdo creationists, get the upper hand no matter what the data says. Oh, I'm a slave to the data. They love to say that, but no, they're not. If they were, they would tear up that whole chart from 2009, and they would tear up the 2011 chart too, and later the Homo naledi, which also Lee Berger brought forth, is also super questionable by all his other evolutionary friends. It's just not happening for them.
Yeah, man, this has been so great, and I know that there's so much more you could have covered as well.
Oh man, all those comments about Naledi, all those comments about Sediba, all the extra, there were things on that 2009 chart that you recognized as red comments from things I just showed you, but some of them were things I didn't have time to show you. But it's all there, man. It's all there. We got the documentation on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wanted to go back to the human chimp comparison, because I'm sure you've heard of Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins with ICR and his research in that area.
He's one of the new guys, isn't he?
Yeah, he's been there a few years. I can't say how long, but I know he actually
I'm from the Gish and Morris era.
Oh, okay, yeah. So he definitely
Sherwin,
came after
Frank
them.
Sherwin, who I've worked with.
Yeah, Frank Sherwin's a great guy. Now he looked more in depth at this issue, and there's several. I put it in the comment section, but I know he looked at it and he said, and I'll quote him here and from the article I posted. He said, he said that based on my research on human chimp similarity on the half of the data sets that appear to have much less human DNA, based on my work, I'm seeing not more than an 85% DNA similarity of chimpanzee to human, and that it's probably less than that. And I think he said right around the time he was doing that research, scientists also came up with about that same number. And you could, I can't say exactly I'll try to post that later if I can. But the 80, that's a pretty significant find, I would say.
You said 80%?
80. He says around 85% now.
Well, monkeys, you think of all the living things that exist on this planet and us. Of all the living things, the chimpanzees look the most like us. I mean, they don't have claws. They have fingernails, stereoscopic vision. They have, the opposable thumbs, all the different primate kinds that are listed, that are known. Except that monkeys have those thumbs on their foot. They're the most looking like us of anything. So in chemistry, structure and function go together. Same thing in biology. We would expect their DNA to be more like ours, not because we came from them and we're related, but because the body structures and body chemistry, they're all coded for by the DNA, is the most similar between us and anything else, and them, us and them. And so the DNA, even if fairies made us, the DNA would have to be similar because everything else about us is similar. It's just, it would be that way whether evolution was true or not, and yet they annex this ipso facto. You see, in the scientific method, you look for an observation that can only be true if your hypothesis is right, not if 10 other hypotheses could also be right. You got to find something that could only be true if you're right. And of course, this DNA similarity thing is not like that. It's not significant data.
Yeah, and I like how you pointed out originally when you brought that up, is that even if it was that close, it's still a big problem. And I encourage you guys rewind and listen to that section, because that
36 million base pairs.
Yeah, exactly. Now there's another issue related to this.
I want to make mention Svante Pabo at Max Planck Institute, who did all the research on the FOXP2 gene. And I think I mentioned this before. As you know, genes are normally the protein that's made by the gene is normally 500 to 1500 nucleotides long. There's only a 2 nucleotide difference, amino acid difference between our FOXP2 protein and the monkey's FOXP2 protein, which Pablo said, that's not enough to make our brains 3 times bigger. Something else is going on. This is mysterious. We do not understand. We're not on top of this. Some epigenetics or some nested within nested code, like John Sanford said, is probably what's going on. Okay, I just wanted to point that out about the DNA is very similar, but the differences are way not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And so there's another issue related to this similarity argument that I've seen in the biology textbooks. And again, so people don't think we're just making up these claims. I mean, you have your own slides as well, and this is the one they use in El Paso, and just showing that on the picture there. But there's another claim about some about a fusion. Let me see if I can represent this. They talk about a human chromosome fusion that it's supposed side that could explain evolution.
I found out I actually have it. Is that the same one you've got?
No, I think that's 6th edition. I have 9th edition.
Oh, okay. So, well, there you go. Oh, the chromosome fusion.
Yes, let's get into that.
I mean, this is what Kenneth Miller loves, and evolutionists love it. I'm sorry. This is actually evidence that we're not related to chimpanzees.
Yeah, can you explain that some more?
Yeah, okay. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Monkeys have 24. Now, because we do look a lot like monkeys, it's possible that way in the past, humans had 24 pairs of chromosomes, not 23. And it's possible that chromosome, I forget which 2 fused to make human chromosome number 2, but they believe that 2 of the chromosomes fused together, and that shows that we came from monkeys, because these two parts of chromosome number 2 actually looks like these 2 monkey chromosomes. Well, think of it. You got to understand this now. Every single human on the planet has a chromosome number 2 that looks like that and has 23 pairs of chromosomes. If our chromosomes did fuse a long time ago, whoever had the unfused chromosomes and 24 pairs has all died out. And the only surviving humans today have a chromosome number 2 that looks like the way yours and mine does.
And they have 48, right? Chimps, gorillas, orangutans have 48. That's what you're saying?
No, they have 24 pairs.
Oh, sorry.
And we have 24 pairs. Now, no monkey, no other primate has this fusion thing. Every single monkey has the 2 separate, I forget, 12 and 14, something like that, fused to make 2 in the fusion story. All humans have got it. No monkey has it, which means it would have had to have happened just by luck at exactly the moment that humans broke off from the chimps, because it didn't linger. So none of our chimp cousins have got it. It never got into one of them, even though we lived for millions and millions of years together as the same almost thing and could interbreed. And it happened either just, it couldn't happen before we split, and it couldn't happen after we split. You see, if it happened exactly when we split, then it would be like this if evolution was true. No monkeys have it, all humans do have it. That's a pretty clean break with our ancient monkey genetics. The odds, just the logic of it is really bad. This is really evidence that we and chimps are not related. We got this fusion, our chromosomes fused, theirs never did. I'm not debating that we might have had the same number of chromosomes as monkeys did back in the past, but humans fused, even if we did fuse. And it's very, very debatable whether the fusion actually did happen or not. Like it's very, very debatable that our DNA is 98.6% the same or 80% the same. This fusion may or may not have happened. If it did, then it only happened in humans. It never happened in monkeys. This just shows that our lineages genetically are different, separate streams, not the same.
Right. Yeah, and those watching again, there's a good article if you want to go into that some more by Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins, geneticist, and he explains that human and then that fusion issue as well. And a good resource, you go to icr.org, you can get this magazine for free monthly. So I'm always a big fan of free stuff. I want to revisit as well the issue of fossils out of order. We looked at that Latoli one, and I think that has to be really emphasized, the significance of this issue. And there's several others. I think I heard Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins also mentioned several examples like Olduvai hominid 1. It was an anatomically modern human fossil discovered in 1913 in the same strata as Australopithecus fossils in Olduvai, Tanzania. So maybe
Olduvai Gorge,
Olduvai, yeah,
where the Leakeys did a lot of their work.
Oh, okay, right. So I don't know. You can explain some more. Just again, why that's so significant. Things out of order.
Well, out of sequence fossils are real important. And it's not just the humans. In dinosaurs turning into bird evolution. In that sequence, the one that looks the most like a bird is Archaeopteryx, the Archaeopteryx lithographa. And it's dated by their own methods at 150 million years old, whereas Caudipteryx and the Proto-Archaeopteryx come 30 million years later. And Proto-Archaeopteryx is supposed to come first. And it's all out of sequence. The precursors of dinosaurs in the evolution story, their fossils were also found by Kenneth Patey and popularized that. And he's a big guy at Berkeley, like Tim White. And they found them in the same strata with dinosaur fossils. And then they found the Tiktaalik rosei was supposed to be the first fish that was on its way to becoming animal crawling on the land. And then they found footprints in a lair in Poland. There was 30 million years before that. There was already something walking around on the land. And Jennifer Clack said, well, we're just going to have to go back to the drawing board on fish to human evolution. Now, every time they find one of these things that's in the wrong spot for their story, hope springs eternal, man. They keep the faith. I got to tell you, this is real tunnel vision, sticking to their story no matter what. Because as I think it was L. Harrison Matthews said back in 1959, he said, We believe in our theory of evolution, not because of logical, coherent evidence, but because the only other alternative, special creation, is clearly incredible. Just, they can't do the go there. Like you were saying, we can't allow a divine foot in the door.
Yeah.
They can't allow a creationary orchard foot in their evolutionary tree door. Boy, I mixed a lot of metaphors there. They can't even start that. They cannot tolerate any kind of a high intensity desk lamp or a microscope on their theory. It's like some guy that, you know, is coming to your door and he flashes, you know, his badge, and, you know, and does it really quick, and it's really some imposter of a policeman. They're going to abduct you now. So, I mean, they flash these credentials too fast. Now, I actually was on the curriculum board for a county, a public school county, and everyone knew I was a creationist on the board. But I pushed for spending 3 weeks on evolution, because I knew if you camped on evolution for 3 whole weeks, it would just go look stupider and stupider the more you dug into it. And I pushed for 3 weeks, and I got it too. Really? They normally like to flash through it real fast and not explore it in detail, because the minute you start noticing, you say, wait a minute, hey, that doesn't match. Wait a minute, hey, that doesn't match.
Hold on.
A minute. The guy who dug it up said, it's got these bones in the wrong spot. It's in the wrong layer. And the more you study it, the more it looks bad. You got to get in the weeds and get your nose in the weeds before you can miss the big picture that bad. So much so that you have, love is blind in this case, and so is justice in this case.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting that you would say, hey, let's spend more time, but it totally makes sense. As you're saying, you look at it some more, you like, if we're going to be objective, then let's do that. Let's look at it. I have noticed that people will want to stray, and then it's very philosophically driven and very driven by really the presupposition of this worldview itself. Now, what would you say to those who are like, well, okay, if we're going to be objective and have a balanced look, like how do you present like an alternative? Like people say, okay, well, do you present intelligent design or biblical creation and evolution? Of course, intelligent design is not really a reference to the creator of the Bible. It's just a vague, there is a designer.
It's a little raised eyebrow to there might be a God, you know?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So like, what would be your suggestion, since you were on a board like that, where people are like, oh, hey, they think you can be neutral on this issue, which I think is a myth, but how do you approach it then? Because we don't know neutrality, but what suggest people look at, say, a 3-week series of evolution? Do they make reference of a creator, or do they test it against Genesis, or how should they go about it?
Well, I guess the thing that comes to mind was when I was debating Kenneth Miller on this in front of the WGBH TV cameras. That never actually made it anywhere because it didn't go well for the evolution side.
Oh, wow.
That was my first actual debate. I had 30 people interceding for me that night, and oh, glory to God on that one. But he said to me, now, Dr. Jackson, I have a friend who's a Christian scientist. I said, you mean the religion, or a scientist who's a Christian? He goes, the religion. Now, listen, he said, and they believe in the spiritual theory of disease and not the germ theory. Because I was saying we should do equal time for creation and evolution in the classroom. He was saying, no, we shouldn't. He goes, do you think we really should spend 50-50 on the spirit theory versus the germ theory of disease in our biology classes, just because Christian scientists and Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't know if Jehovah's Witnesses, but Christian scientists do. And I said, no, but if I knew that half the students in my class were Christian scientists, went to the Church of the Scientists down the street, and the other half I knew, their families all worked at the Smithsonian or something, and their dads, and I knew half the students believed in evolution or in the germ theory, and half of them believed the spirit theory, it'd be ludicrous, ridiculous insanely bad educational practice not to address this in the class. What, are you going to pretend half the class isn't with you on this? You need to discuss it. This is all about critical thinking skills. This is all about, values clarification. This is all about how to compare and evaluate models on the highest level of the Piaget's, thinking, and all these other crap walls, all of these kinds of things we do in educational practices. You should really dive in with this and have some good class discussions. RESPECT for everyone in the room. And well, he just did not know what to say about that, because educationally speaking, that was really the truth. We should, if you know, a lot of the students, and in almost all classes in every part of the country, you're going to have a significant fraction of the students who don't believe in evolution, who maybe even believe in the Bible, the biblical account, and you need to discuss it. I, in 1982, was teaching biology in high school, and I had a Muslim girl and a Catholic boy in the class get into a big argument. The Muslim girl was defending Genesis, and the Catholic boy was saying that, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden was silly. And they had this big knockdown, drag out fight, the first time I'd ever taught biology as a high school teacher. And I realized after that, we had to have some class discussion rules, but there was a Muslim girl chewing out a Catholic boy for not believing the Bible. I thought that was pretty funny, but it was these different views were in the class. And so we needed to bring it all out and discuss it with respect for one another. And after that year, I didn't have those kinds of roller coaster rides. We had wonderful, the best class discussions of the year were when I did the evolution chapter.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting too. And I think if you have discussion guidelines and to move forward, that's probably a good model. Not that you would like take the textbook of every viewpoint, but like you have at least time for discussion. I think that's a good approach.
I had in 1981, Isaac Asimov and Duane Gish had a debate through the postal mail in Science Digest, and the text of it, there'd be one argument, there'd be the other argument, then there'd be a rebuttal, then there'd be a rebuttal, and then there was a final statement by each. And I printed that thing out and gave it to my students, and every night for homework they read it, and then we talked about two things the next day. Wow. Who do you think won that round of the debate in our reading last night, and who did you actually believe? And they got the point. Sometimes somebody who argues really well, I'm still not buying it, or I still believe what I wanted to believe. A lot of times they disagreed with the one who they thought won that part of the debate. It was just rich with learning opportunities and critical thinking skills. So what do I think about the two model approach? I think you're being intellectually and educationally dishonest, and you're not educating, you're indoctrinating unless you teach the two model approach.
I think that's so refreshing to hear, because so many people will say, oh, biblical creationists are just about indoctrinating. Like you hear Bill Nye saying, like, no, we care about critical thinking, and we're made to expose people to the best arguments, a still man of their argument, and test it against, well, is this logically coherent? Does it correspond to the facts? And if not, we need to be objective and think about it, because again, we have to understand that there is no neutrality on education ultimately. And to say, oh, we can't think critically about this or discuss it is not our culture saying, well, don't talk about certain things, like the whole mantra, don't talk about religion and politics. Or maybe we should have like your approach. Let's learn how to talk about it and how to listen and have good guidelines. Because it's dangerous what we see, where people just avoid things. That's not helping us engage with the truth.
I have evolutionists get mad at me for teaching creation. I have creationists get mad at me for teaching evolution.
Wow.
But I think the only honest way to do it is to teach both sides and have great discussions and agree to disagree. And it was great. The students really learned a lot during that time.
Yeah, There's a quote I was going to read at the beginning, and now I think this is the perfect time for it. And this is another great book I recommend is Stealing from God by Frank Turek. And he says why atheists need God to make their case. And if any of my atheists or materialist friends are watching this, I would really challenge you to read this book. Check out all of Dr. Jackson's page, Points of Origin. And so here's an issue that is become a prominent epistemology. How do we know what we know? It's called scientism. And so I think this was, I want to say Peter Atkins, he was with Craig. And of course, I disagree with William Lane Craig on his views of the age of the earth and so forth. But
you'll find most of those big speakers, Ravi Zacharias, William Lane Craig, a lot of them are old earthers.
Yeah, I mean, I call him a brother in Christ, but obviously we've laid out in several episodes.
Hey, Lee Strobel's an old earther. He's a real gentleman about it. But how many people have gotten saved because of his ministry? I'll
many,
cool
many.
With that. I don't think he's right about that, but hey, look, there's some good there.
Yeah, and absolutely. And we laid out, of course, why I think it is a significant issue. But I wanted to read this short section here as it relates to his discussion with Atkins, and as it's laid out here, he says, Atkins says, well, there's no need for God. Everything in the world can be understood without needing to evoke a God. You have to accept that's one possible view to take about the world. Sure, that's possible, Craig admitted, but then interrupting Atkins, do you deny that science can account for everything? Challenged Atkins. Yes, I do deny that science can account for everything, said Craig. So what can it account for? Demanded Atkins. I think that there are a good number of things that cannot be scientifically proven, but that we're all rational to accept, Craig began, interrupting, such as, then Craig said, let me list 5. First, logical and mathematical truths cannot be proven by science. Science presupposes logic and math, so that to try to prove them by science would be arguing in a circle. Second, metaphysical, like there are other minds other than my own, or that the external world is real, or that the past was not created 5 minutes ago with the appearance of age, are rational beliefs that cannot be scientifically proven. Third, ethical beliefs about statements of value are not accessible by the scientific method. You can't show by science that the Nazi scientists in the camps did anything evil as opposed to the scientists in Western democracies. Fourth, aesthetic judgments cannot be assessed by the scientific method because the beautiful, like the good, cannot be scientifically proven. And finally, most remarkably, would be science itself. Science cannot be justified by the scientific method since it is permeated with unprovable assumptions. For example, the special theory of relativity, the whole theory hinges on the assumption that the speed of light is constant in a one-way direction between any 2 points, A and B, but that strictly cannot be proven. We simply have to assume that in order to hold to the theory. Feeling vindicated, Buckley peered over at Atkins and cracked. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Atkins offered a weak smile, but he had no answer for Craig. During Craig's 5 examples, Atkins looked stunned. It was as if he had virtually no knowledge of philosophy or the fact that science is built on philosophical principles. His claim that science can account for everything is another way of saying that we get all our truth from science, which is known as scientism. And so you can't do anything in science without assuming several philosophical principles. And so I read that section because I think it's so poignant. It lays out like you have to presuppose things, the ability to even reason, the ability to make moral choices, and is all laid out in there. And to be able to do good science is built off of good philosophy, and good philosophy can't happen unless the biblical worldview is ultimately true, is what I would argue. But we have materialism is the dominant, I'd say, religion in most of our secular universities and schools. And if they're not allowing free discourse as you laid out, then it is becoming brainwashed.
Well, like you said, the guy didn't even realize that everything he said was objective truth, was really based on a philosophical position that he accepted as truth, as objective truth. And it's like Jesus said on the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They don't know they're doing this. They're deceived by the great deceiver, who's the best liar of all time. He's very good at it. When I was a senior in high school, I was already a super science geek. I mean, I started geeking when I was 6 years old, And by the time I was a high school senior, I had not gotten saved yet. I totally believed in evolution, even though I was thinking there might be a God. When I got saved, I instantly knew evolution couldn't be true. I didn't know the apologetic, but I knew since the Bible is true, it's clearly you can't, and Richard Dawkins says it, you can't marry Genesis and evolution. It doesn't work. It's oil and water. It's apples and oranges. You can't do it. And I knew that the day I got saved, and I was traumatized. I did not know what I was going to do. I knew evolution couldn't be true, but I went down to Christian bookstore and I hunted, and I found a little book called the Creation Evolution Handbook, and then later I found Scientific Creationism by Henry Morris, and I began to realize there was a science apologetic, but I did not know what I was doing with science. I just knew instantly that it was wrong. And I do think the Spirit of God moving in will show you that it's wrong. I do think if you listen to the Spirit of God, you'll know that the timeline of the Bible is also true. And so many other things. It's not a salvation breaker if you're an old earther. Not, even if you're a geocentrist or a flat earther, I don't think it's salvation, because what do you have to do to be saved? Paul told the Philippian jailer, believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord, and you'll be saved. After that, you open up to him, his Spirit moves in, and he's the Spirit of truth. You begin to read the Bible and you begin to understand what's true and what's not true. And all these things will be added unto you. That's how I think true thinking, true logic, true science, and real philosophy and real objective truth can come into a person's life. I think it's the only way, because we fool ourselves constantly.
Yeah, amen, amen. Well, this has just been an excellent conversation. I want to hit on one point that I always get, or just one last question that I always get on this issue is, okay, well, if the biblical timeline is right, and I know there's a shorter and a longer answer, of course, so we're closing up here, but the issue is, if the biblical timeline is right, then why are human bones so scarce in the fossil record?
Well, if you look at the human bones and see what kind of shape they're in, and then you look at even the little dinosaurs and their bones, or the bird bones that are supposed to be 150 million years old, and our fossils only go back 2 million years. These older ones are in better shape. Why? And because they're the same age. Human mammal bodies float when they drown, like in Noah's flood, and so do bird bodies. But reptilian and other things, they sink and they get covered with the sediment. So mammal and bird bodies, including human bodies, would be at the top layers. Maybe they're more subject to groundwater leaching or being exposed to elements, blah, blah, blah. Humans also would have ran for the hills. They would have drowned. Their bodies would have floated and rotted. That's why human fossils are so rare. They're smarter. Birds and some of the higher mammals, like predators, are smart enough to head for the hills, and they would escape being buried in the sediments and drowned in the water longer. And so they'd be higher up. They head for the hills, head for the high country. That, I don't know. Did that really hit your answer?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great brief answer on that. And there's, of course, a lot of the issues deal with the global flood, as you mentioned. And there's good evidence that ancient man was intelligent and that we can trust the biblical timeline. And I know there's
evidence ancient man was a lot smarter than us. I'm telling you that right now. Technological evidence too.
Yeah. Absolutely. That fits in perfectly. I mean, of course, if you have Adam talking with God, there's a lot he's going to learn, and he lived for hundreds of years in knowledge that would be passed on. But then you have the Tower of Babel, collective knowledge. It's not going to be the same when you have people broken up and after the flood and was Tower of Babel and so forth. So some ways you could say people were kind of, I don't know if it's starting over, but to a degree after the Tower of Babel, right?
Yeah, and the technologies, and the societies were so different. The Renaissance happens in the Western world, whereas the Eastern, the Orient, although they developed incredible things that the Westerners didn't, they stayed that way for 1,000 for 2,000 years. Whereas in the western part of the continent, they went on because of the Judeo-Christian worldview. And many evolutionists and atheists I've met agree the Renaissance really was fueled by Judeo-Christian worldview.
Yeah, that's so good. And I thought that was helpful just to piece those things together, because those are always the main questions. Well, we're going to wrap up our time today. And I really want to encourage everybody listening. This Friday morning, it's going to be a really special final session with Dr. Jackson on the Answering the Biology textbook series. We're going to be looking at one of the biggest icons of evolution, dinosaurs. How did dinosaurs fit into the Bible? I don't think that was dinosaur fossils were planted there to trick Christians. I think it fits in very nicely. I don't think we need to say stuff like that. Science confirms the Bible, and I think you're going to see that Friday. You're going to be blown away. I hope everybody will join us.
We're going for soft tissues as the centerpiece of that, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. We'll hit on that. I mean, I'm sure we'll explain a little bit how they fit in with the Bible as well. So that's a huge issue. And of course, there's many issues we haven't covered, but if you have questions, put them in the comment box. Maybe myself or Dr. Jackson can respond to you, or we'll get to one of those questions on Friday as well. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you'll share this from Facebook or on YouTube, or check out our podcast on Spotify and Apple called